What's up, guys? You'll notice that I'm sitting here where a lot of these speeches that you'll see are situated. Most of them, actually, because I did a lot of practice. No one really asked for this, but I do want to include these speeches kind of here for posterity. I want to look back on this in 10, 20 years if I'm still alive and say, hey, this was my senior year. These are the speeches I gave my senior year. So I start this off with the 4 speeches I gave at IASAS. For those of you who don't know, IASAS is a inter-school conference with 5 other schools in the region, and we do competitions and stuff. So this was the IASAS impromptu speaking competition. So these are the speeches I gave. I'll include the prompts before each speech, and then after those IASAS prompts, I've included all the practice prompts that I recorded. So these are all the things I did and sent to Miss Baisley, the impromptu sponsor, and that's how there's not really, I don't think you can really see an improvement, but these are just a bunch of mix and matches about the speeches that I did. And I mentioned anime and basketball a lot. I don't know what that says about me. Something. It says something. Anyways, enjoy.
Have you ever looked at a gradient? You know a gradient, right? From red to blue, and there's that hue of purple in the middle. Have you ever looked at it really, really closely? Have you seen how the colors just go on and on and on and on? And you start from red, and by the time you're end of the picture, it's blue. Now for me, that's somehow super amazing. How we can take colored pixels and shift them slightly on, and suddenly they're an entirely different color. And looking at gradients my entire life, there are gradients all around us, but looking at gradients my entire life has really taught me that even though you can't see these imperceptible differences, I mean, if you really zoom into a gradient, you really won't be able to tell the difference, but once you look at that big picture, you can see that as you go on, there is a change. So let's give a more concrete example, shall we? My friends and I did a 24-hour live stream, and one of the songs we did on this live stream, it was a concert, was Hey Jude. And you know how Hey Jude goes, right? At the end of the song goes, na, 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 na. And it just goes on and on and on and on like that, right? Now, obviously, if we kept saying that na, 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 if we kept singing it the same way on and on this over and over and over, that would get super boring, especially for the viewers, because we were trying to raise money. But as we kept singing it, we kept making slight shifts and changes in the way we were singing na 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 na, right? Sometimes we were doing like a na 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 na, and then we were doing harmonies like na 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 na, stuff like that. The changes were so imperceptible from each na 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 to the next na na na, but if you watched the entire song, it's on YouTube, but if you watch the entire song from a big picture view, you can see that the way we started the song was more of the traditional Beatles thing, and at the end of the song, it sounded like some cult chant. So there were changes, but they were very small, and it took us like 3 minutes of na-na-nas to get there. But as we sang it on and on, there was a change. Really, what I'm trying to say here is that you have to let things run. You have to let time continue, because things always change with time. Time changes everything. I'll take, for example, if we're on the topic of music, my experience with learning music. When I was a freshman, I was very bad at music. I only really knew the basics of chordal theory and chord progressions and kind of like what a scale was. And now today, I'm not Jacob Collier. I'm still a lot better than I was 4 years ago. I understand a lot more about intervals and chord progressions and the way harmonics work. And if you told me my sophomore year that I was improving in music, I would have told you that I wasn't. But I was. It's just that the changes were so small. And when people ask me, hey, how did you get better at music? I can't point to any one thing that sparked it. I can't point at a straw that broke the camel's back, because there were none. It was like a bunch of small straws that eventually broke the camel's back. It's a gradient of music learning over time. And I had to trust myself that I would get better at music and just keep going at it, because I let it run on and on, and things just got better at time. My music learning got better. And we can look at not just your mental brains, but also your physical capacity. As a baseball player, the way I throw has changed for the past 7 years. I used to pitch, like when I threw the ball, I used to put my arm like this, my front arm like this. But now I kind of do like a sweeping motion. But I didn't go from just this, which was my first pitching motion, to this. I went from this to more of like a this, kind of like a this, and you see how it's slowly evolving. That physical baseball throwing evolution. And things were changing, and now I can say that I'm pretty good at pitching, not to be self-centered or anything, but that physical evolution was just a matter of time. It wasn't a result of anything. Let's end probably on the most relatable note. You know what happens when a kettle boils, right? And you kind of just stay there, you wait, you're waiting again. And what you don't see under that kettle lid is that it's getting there. The water's heating up. That gradient of water heating up over time, it's going. You just have to wait. You just have to wait. So whatever it is you're doing right now, whether you're learning music, playing baseball, singing a song, you just have to trust the process. You have to trust that over time, things will improve as long as you just keep at it. Just let time go, and on and on and on, and things will get better. Trust me, they will. Thank you. So I'm in a fantasy basketball league, and currently my record is 10-0, meaning 10 wins and 0 losses. Pretty impressive, right? But at the start of the year, I didn't know that I was going to be 10 wins and 0 losses. In fact, I thought I was going to be pretty unfortunate. And it's for a very simple reason. I accepted a trade request from one of my friends. He wanted to give me Chris Boucher for Joe Ingles. Now, you don't necessarily need to know who these players are, but you do need to know that Chris Boucher, before this season, never really got a lot of playing time. He was a big man that didn't really know how to score or do some defense. While Joe Ingles is a pretty reliable role player on the Utah Jazz who gets decent scoring outputs and assist numbers and all that kind of jazz. And the entire league, so I'm in an 18-person league, everyone in the league vetoed that trade. I had accepted it. I'd wanted the trade to go through. I wanted to give away Joe Ingles for Chris Boucher, but everyone in the league said, no, you can't do that. And the trade was canceled. And a month after that trade was vetoed, I was checking the stats, and Chris Boucher was averaging 40 fantasy points, while Joe Ingles was only averaging 20. And I was kind of upset. I was upset because most people disagreed with my feeling for that trade. They thought, hey, that trade's not equal at all. You would be getting scammed out of your mind if you were giving away Joe Ingles. And then they were wrong. In fact, that trade was in some ways equal. In fact, I was actually going to win that trade if I took it. The reason, of course, the people vetoed the trade, like I mentioned just now, was that they thought it was unequal. They thought it wasn't fair. They thought I was giving away too much for too little in return. A reliable role player for someone who's never really played before? Come on, you're out of your mind. But what that taught me, and what that's kept in my mind for the entire fantasy basketball season so far, is that all trades have to be equal. And if everyone doesn't see the trade as equal, they're just going to veto it. And that applies to many things in life. Not just trades, but really like this cost-benefit analysis. For example, my friend Brian, we used to take the bus together. We used to take the bus together every day. And then at the start of the year, he told me that he wasn't going to be taking the bus. He was going to be taking the cab. And he did some cost estimation. Apparently taking a cab is cheaper than paying for the entire bus semester. I don't believe him, but whatever, it's his money. And he took that trade. He traded the bus for the cab because he believed that his time, obviously taking the bus is a lot more time than taking the cab. He believed his time was a bit more valuable than just hanging out with his friends. I'm not the only one he takes the bus with, but we all used to kind of hang out on the bus as we left school. And in my mind, that trade was not smart at all. Personally, for me, I would rather be spending time with my friends on the bus instead of taking the cab by myself and spending apparently less money and spending less time. But that was a trade he made, and so far in the semester, he's been dealing with those consequences. Was the trade equal, the bus and the cab? My opinion, no. And a lot of people agree with me. And a lot of people still don't understand why he thinks it's cheaper taking a cab. But whatever. It basically just goes to show you that trades have to be equal. You'll see this in a lot of movies as well, right? When a character has something so much to gain, they also have a lot to lose. I mean, just think about it. If there's something so much to gain, but the character doesn't have a lot to lose, then the audience will be just screaming at the screen like, just do it. You got nothing to lose, right? But no, the consequences must always be equal. There has to be an equal trade. You know, when Frodo throws a ring into Mount Doom and saves humanity, well, the consequence is that if he fails, you know, humanity is doomed. Sauron just consumes everybody. You know? If Luke destroys the Death Star, that's a great thing. The Empire is ruined for a bit, but what's the trade-off? Well, he dies, and so does the entire Rebel base. No, that trade needs to be equal. Basically, what I'm saying is that if you're not keeping the costs and the benefits equal in your life, if you're not balancing them out, you're going to find yourself losing a lot, or you could find yourself gaining a lot. But at the end of the day, if they're not equal, then there's really not much to it. Making the trades equal makes it worth your time. It makes it worth the other person's time too. Thank you. I applied for IASAS film 3 years ago when I was a sophomore, and I didn't get in. I didn't make it. And obviously the reason was because my film just wasn't good enough. People said it was hard to watch. They just didn't like watching it. And I thought about that for a while because, in my opinion, my film had pretty good cinematography. The story was pretty decent. And then I realized after turning up the volume on my computer that it was really bad sounding. The audio was just terrible. You could hear the wind because we were filming outside in a park. You could hear the wind like whoosh in the background. It just sounded terrible. And I realized, and my film teacher has subsequently told me many times afterwards, that sound is so important in film. But really it's this holistic experience. When something is hard to watch, in this example, my film, it might not be because of the visuals. It might be because of some other factor, in this case, the sound and how bad it was. When something is hard to watch or bad, it's not always because of that one visual aspect or that one tiny thing that is obvious, but it's because of some other factor that is impeding on the success of the whole. Let's put it in a more relevant context. You guys have all seen Star Wars, yes? The very first Star Wars, A New Hope. And I assume you guys liked it to some extent, yes? Did you know that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas's wife really hated Star Wars the first time they saw it? And I'll tell you why. It's because George Lucas did not have the correct sequence of events to make Star Wars watchable. It was just hard to watch the first time they saw it. In the very first draft of Star Wars, the Death Star was not about to destroy the Rebel base. You remember that, right? How they have to destroy the Death Star before it destroys Yavin 4, where the Rebels are staying? Yeah, that wasn't happening in the first draft of Star Wars. In fact, the Death Star was just out in space, and the Rebels were just going to it. There were no stakes. The Rebels had nothing to lose by going there. And that's what's made it so hard to watch because the viewers were just so bored. Spielberg was like, dude, I don't care about this. I mean, if the Rebels die, okay, sure, but send in more Rebels. There's nothing going on here. All George Lucas and his wife, who was the editor, all they had to do was suddenly just make the Death Star start attacking the Rebel base, and now everyone's leaning forward in their seats. Everyone's like, oh, what's going to happen next? Oh, is Luke going to do it? Is he going to do it? And that's what made it so easy to watch afterwards. Everyone loved Star Wars, right? But if you had seen the first draft of it, you would have probably not cared at all. Really, it's all about, and especially in film, you can't always, when you're saying something is hard to watch, you have to really consider all the aspects of it. You know, usually, yes, when something is hard to watch or cringy, it's because of the story, right? Someone says a really bad line like, and that's why she's valedictorian, and you're just like slapping yourself in the face. You're just like, why? Why did the writer write that? And usually that's the reason why it's sometimes hard to watch. But other times it is other things, like the sequence of events is incorrect. Maybe the color correction is just a bit off, like, oh, these shots are just a bit too green and it's kind of eking me out. Or maybe it's, in my case, and what's kind of bothered me for 3 years now, was the sound. And that's why every time I get on a film set nowadays, every time, I make sure the sound is good. Because I know if the sound isn't good, if I can't give a holistically good experience in all aspects to my audience, no matter what one small thing it is, it's going to be hard to watch. You have to pay attention to every little small detail, every little small thing, if you want to make what you're making good. Thank you. I'm a big fan of this little game that people know as Minecraft. Specifically, I'm a big fan of playing Bed Wars. Now, if you don't know, Bed Wars is this Hunger Games style mini game where you go off to other bases and try and break their beds, and once their bed is broken, they die. It's pretty fun. And obviously, Bed Wars is revolving around this idea of fighting. And when you lose all your health, you die. In essence, you're wasted. So, one of the most important skills I've learned while playing Bed Wars is that I always have to keep an eye on my health, because you'll lose when you die. I mean, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? Once you're wasted, you're out. There's no coming back. So keeping an eye on your health is one of the most important things you can do, not just in video games, but really in everything you do. Let's take Derrick Rose, for example. In 2011, Derrick Rose won the NBA MVP award. Everyone thought he was the next LeBron James, the next Michael Jordan. And then you know what happened a couple years after that? He got injured. And then he got injured again. And then again. He kept getting wasted over and over. And now no one is ever putting him back in an MVP discussion, because he's just never going to get back to that. And the reason why he kept getting injured and wasted so often over and over and over was because he was just too explosive. Whenever he jumped up for a dunk, he would land flat on his knee. Like his legs would be straight. And that does a lot of damage on your knees. He didn't really take care of his body as he should have been. And so yeah, he won one MVP, but now what? He hasn't got a ring. He hasn't won any more awards since then. Really, it was kind of a waste. Wasted, if you will. He wasted that opportunity by wasting on himself, and now that's all gone. He didn't take care of himself enough. And I think, while none of us obviously are basketball players or play Minecraft, we can take care of ourselves in other ways too. You know when teachers always tell you, get 8 hours of sleep? That's because they don't want you to get wasted and waste your opportunity on those tests and things that are coming up in your life. Because when you're not good up here, well, how are you going to be good in your grades? You're just wasting away as you waste away your opportunities. So when you're going into things, besides just sleep, but alcohol, drugs, or whatever you do, you have to keep care of your health. You have to make sure, obviously the literal interpretation of wasted is when you're drunk or whatever. You have to make sure that you're not getting wasted, you're not throwing away your opportunities. Because if you take care of yourself, then everything else will fall in line afterwards. I think we can end with a more contemporary example. If any of you guys have seen Whiplash, the 2014 film by Damien Chazelle, you see that at the end of the film, he's drumming away, playing Caravan by Buddy Rich, and his hands are bloody and sweaty, and the cymbals and the toms are all just covered in sweat and blood. And obviously this is a very extreme analogy of drumming, but I can tell you right now that one, first off, that doesn't happen in real life, but two, if it did, he would not be drumming the same way the next day. His hands would not work the same way they used to. And you want to know why that would happen? It's because he pushed himself too hard. He wasted himself. And he wasted his opportunities for future drumming, all for that one final show. Now, of course, if you're an artist, maybe you want to do that, but in my opinion, that's just not worth it. So just keep in mind, just like in Minecraft Bed Wars, you lose when you die. You lose when you die, or you lose when you get wasted, when you waste away on yourself and you waste all your opportunities. Take care of yourself, and the rest will follow. Thank you.
If you don't live under a rock, you've probably watched one or two TV shows in your lifetime. And most TV shows, if they are well produced, have a theme song. Iconic theme songs, like Friends. I'll be there for you, right? Or How I Met Your Mother. Or Family Guy. It seems to me that all you see, you guys are kind of getting in your head already because you know these shows, right? But let's get into anime. Because anime is a Japanese form of television shows, and like Western TV shows, they also have theme songs. But unlike Western TV shows, their theme songs usually change. So if you watch any anime, Attack on Titan, for example, in each season has a different opening theme. Okay, that's all well and good. But there's one anime that actually breaks the mold and follows Western TV conventions, and that's Hunter x Hunter, but it's usually referred to as just Hunter x Hunter. Now, the theme of Hunter x Hunter is titled Departure. Now, Departure it goes something like, you can fly again, da 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 da. And from the very first episode until the 148th episode, the theme song of Hunter x Hunter is the same. And immediately when you think of departure, it's a very apt metaphor for the show. The premise of Hunter x Hunter is basically in this world, there are certain individuals who are called hunters, and they have a bunch of privileges, they have a bunch of powers. They're like these upper echelon of individuals who are above everyone else. And literally, not even just pretentiously, like literally, they're just better than everyone else. And Gon, the main character, the protagonist, he leaves his home of Whale Island to go out and become a hunter. So right from the very first episode, you see that he's departing, and he's going off to become this new person. And by the 140th episode, he's still departing because of the theme song, but he's a much newer person, and in essence, he's become a more true version of himself. Really, what I'm trying to say here is that departing a place, your home, your point of comfort, is really not a division of who you are, but a reunion with who you will be and should be. So let's put this into perspective. I'm sure if you're a literary critic or involved in literature in any way, you're probably familiar with The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, right? And Joseph Campbell, when you draw it out in an arc, you know there's the known world and the unknown world. And when you cross into the unknown world, that's when the hero encounters all these things like, he uses a bunch of technical terms like return with the father, the ultimate boon, the flight. But what really matters is that the hero encounters all these unknown adventures in this unknown world. But when he comes out of it, he returns with this treasure, the boon. And while in the hero's journey that's a literal change, it's meant to represent a more metaphysical change of becoming a new person, learning something new about yourself. And that's why the hero's journey is so applicable to everything. So take, for example, Bilbo Baggins. You are a mere hobbit, and one day Gandalf the Grey comes up and says, "Hey, you want to go to Lonely Mountain and get back what was it now? Get back the Anduril, I think that was called, something like that, like this pearl." Bilbo Baggins is like, "I can't do that. I don't want to do that." But just wait, because he does leave, and there's a reason the Hobbit's other title is called There and Back Again, because he departs. And he comes back again a new person. And he becomes this more mature, more grown, more educated person. This departure, this vast departure from his comfort home in, what's it called? His home in the Hobbit town, Hobbiton, I think that's what it's called, to far off Erebor. The two places are completely different. But when he comes back, this change, this departure, has led him to become a new Bilbo, a more true Bilbo. And that's the whole point of the hero's journey. You can't become a hero, you can't take the journey of a hero, unless you depart from the known world. And that's what I find so fascinating about, coming back to it, Hunter x Hunter. The theme never changes. Really, it's a representation of Gon continuing to depart and depart and depart from what is known to what is unknown. Because what is unknown and learned becomes known, and you reset the process, and you learn, and you learn, and you learn again. And that's what's so brilliant about the show. And that's what's so brilliant about the hero's journey. It applies to you too. So go off, depart, become the true you. All right, 504.
If you've ever sat down at a piano, you may be slightly intimidated. There are 88 keys in front of you, and you don't know what to do. If you've never taken piano lessons before, that is. You kind of just, you just don't know what to do. You're kind of helpless at the piano. And then you look over at your right, and you see this random Joe just playing Mozart's Fifth Symphony and Eine kleine Munchkin or whatever, and you just go, wow! I wish I could do that. I wish I could compose like that guy. And I've gotten this question a lot. Cal, how do you improvise? Like, what do you do to improv? And how do you come up? How are you writing up songs? And the answer is really, really easy, but it's also very difficult to learn. The answer is just to do. You just do. I'll give you an example by how I came up with my latest song, Taxi Ride. I sat at the piano. I played an F major chord. Thought it sounded pretty good. All right, so I was like, what would sound good after that? What if I did this? And I literally just played a random chord, F minor. Okay, that sounds pretty good. And C major. And it worked. That was literally it. That was the entire songwriting process. That was my composition. It's not hard, but it's also not easy. Because where does that inspiration come from? Well, my friends, it comes from practice. By playing hundreds and not thousands, hundreds of pieces, my fingers and my mind have subconsciously picked up on patterns that I can then subconsciously play on the piano, and it comes off as improvisation or inspiration. It's a composition. Hold on, I'm just checking the time here. And that applies for many things in life. I'm not an artist in terms of drawing, and I've always wondered how people can just whip out a really elaborate doodle. And I'm sure you've wondered that too if you're not an artist either. Well, do you know how they do it? I can make a pretty good guess. They've practiced hundreds of hours into just drawing as many things as they could, and eventually just becomes second nature to them, and they just draw something and bang, bada bing, bada boom, bada bing. Bring it into people who write for a living. Wow, how do you compose those flowing lyrical lines? Well, it's because they've, one, read a lot, and they've picked up on all the patterns, and they've written a lot, and they've found out what they like, and then it comes off as inspiration because it's been deeply seared into their minds. And you can still bring this to not just the arts. What about sports? You can't forget sports. Let's say you're shooting a basketball, right? Do you think everyone in the world has this very same basketball shooting form? No. The answer is no. How have they figured it out? Well, they learned how to shoot a basketball, and they kept shooting a basketball, and eventually their own idiosyncrasies morphed the basketball shooting form into their own kind of thing. We want to talk about baseball throwing? I don't throw a baseball conventionally. I play baseball. I throw it like, kind of like here. Most people throw it like here. But I just figured out what was good for me. I figured it out. It's kind of like it's a physical improvisation. It's a physical composition. Look guys. Composing, the art of creating, is not about some genius or textbook formula or something you really learn like you would learn math. Composition is about taking practices, deep-seeding them into your mind, searing them, creating this invisible layer and framework, and then just applying it. And it comes off as improvisation. I can sit down at a piano and have no idea what I'm doing. No clue whatsoever. My fingers just move kind of automatically. But they move automatically because that muscle memory has been kind of seared in my head, and I know the patterns and ways the keys will sound. But that just comes from a lot of practice. There's no shortcuts. If you want to learn how to create anything, whether it be music, art, a sport, you have to learn from what came before, practicing what came before, and then morphing it into your own thing. There's no easy way to say it. There's just no easy way to say it.
Did you know that in order to make the Hall of Fame in baseball, you only really have to succeed 3 out of 10 times? That doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not even a majority, but in baseball, there's a thing called batting average, so how often you get a hit out of every, it's a percentage. And most Hall of Famers have a .300 batting average, meaning that out of every 10 at-bats, they have 3 hits. And you wonder, how do these players just keep going even after failing 7 out of 10 times? How do they keep trying and trying again? Well, in baseball, and my coach always tells me this, it's something called short-term memory. You forget your past at bats and you forget your past games if they were bad. And you might say, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Aren't you supposed to learn from the past? Aren't you supposed to learn from your mistakes? And that's true, and that's very true. But the reason Coach tells us this is because if we let our bad at bats affect our future at bats, well, we're just hurting ourselves in the process. Let me give you an example. I have never been a great hitter. I have always been more of a pitcher. So hitting has never been my strong suit. And there have been times where I go a couple games without getting hits. It's called a slump. And slumps, they suck. But I've learned over the years that if I strike out on a bad pitch, or if I just make really bad plays, I have to forget that frustration, that anger, slamming the bat down on the ground. I gotta move on from that. Because in the next at bat, if I'm still frustrated, I'm still angry, I'm still upset and wanting to throw the bat down on the ground, well then the same thing's just gonna happen. So when people say try again, they don't necessarily, what they're saying, and I think I'd like to add some more nuance to that saying, is that you have to forget how the past made you feel, but you have to remember what the past taught you. And you carry that in throughout every at-bat. So I can't remember that frustration, but I have to remember, okay, I just have to swing at that pitch next time it gets to me. And this happened to me before. Last year in impromptu, I made some bad speeches. And if you know the term choking, I kind of choked on some of the prompts. I just blanked, and I couldn't say anything good. But if that had affected my next speeches, then I'm really just affecting more than just one speech. Frustration should only really affect one speech. A bad speech should just be one bad speech, not two bad speeches or three bad speeches. It's just not logical. It doesn't make any sense. If the past matters, which it does, then the past shouldn't make the future worse. That's a bit of a logical leap, and I know that some of you may be thinking, whoa, how'd you get here? But just remember, think back on what I've been saying. We should be getting better at baseball as we play more baseball. We should be getting better at impromptu as we do more impromptu speeches. So if we have one little hiccup, well, it shouldn't be sending us all the way back to square one. Really, right? We should be using mistakes as building blocks, not as pitfalls. Trying and trying again. Keeping that short-term memory is good when you recognize that short-term memory should be used for emotions. Of course, never forget the lessons you've learned, but don't let your emotions and your frustrations hinder you in the future. Of course, if your emotions are part of the lessons you learn, then that's different. But think about it. Just think about it. But don't let the past make your future worse. Just try and try again until you get it, because eventually you will. I'm a big fan of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's a modern-day sitcom where cops work in their police precinct and do, fun jobs and also solve crimes and all that. One of these episodes is spent planning a wedding for one of the police officers. And Captain Holt, the captain of the precinct, spends all his time building a balloon arch for the wedding. And everyone's prediction is, hey, this isn't going to go well. This is terrible, Captain. What are you doing with your life? That's their prediction. They don't think it's going to turn out well. And at the very end of the episode, when everything's resolved, Rosa, who was the bride for the wedding, walks into his captain's office and sees a balloon arch and says, Captain, what is this? And the captain tells, oh, it's just a balloon arch. It's whatever. And Rosa just says, it's beautiful. And there's a pause. And Captain Hulk goes, Vindication! And it's the funniest thing that you'll see in a while. And I'm sure if you go up to any Brooklyn Nine-Nine fan and just say Vindication, they'll instantly get it. Because it's so iconic. And the reason it's so iconic is because against all odds, against all predictions, Captain Holt's balloon arch was justified and appreciated, especially by the bride of the wedding. There is his vindication. And it feels good, right? It feels good, really, when you subvert people's expectations, when you go beyond their expectations and their predictions of what you can accomplish. Take a more real life example. For example, MJ. You guys know Michael Jordan, right? And if you're not familiar with him, he recently released a documentary called The Last Dance, and it turned into a huge meme because every time someone challenged Michael, he would say, "And I took that personally." And well, you know what happened next, right? Because MJ is the greatest of all time. Every time someone said he couldn't win 3 in a row, take a break, and then win 3 in a row again. Every time someone said he couldn't do that kind of stuff, he went and did it. He broke their predictions. He proved them wrong. He took it personally, and hey, in the end, it felt really good to prove them wrong. Personally, for me, I'm constantly betting against myself, while also assuming other people are betting against me. And I'll tell you why I do this. Because it's a win-win scenario. Similar to Captain Holt and MJ, when I do well, I subvert my own expectations of myself and other people's expectations of myself, and it feels good. It feels good to really prove people wrong, to say, hey, I can, instead of, I couldn't. It feels good. Just say it out loud to yourself right now. I can. I can. Even better, I can, and you thought I couldn't, but guess what, buddy? I can. It just feels good like that. In a way, life is satisfying when you win. I mean, that's such a cliche thing to say, but life is satisfying when you win, but it's even more satisfying when you win, and when you win when people thought you couldn't. I mean, just every movie in existence is like that. Lord of the Rings. Oh, Frodo can't put the ring into Mount Doom. He just can't. He possibly can't do it. He possibly can't. It's impossible. And well, he does. Whoa. Luke Skywalker can't possibly destroy the Death Star all on his own in one tiny X-wing. Well, he does. You see where I'm going with this, right? When the odds are stacked against you and everyone's predictions and expectations are going against you, and then you break those, well, let me just tell you right now, there's no better feeling. There is no better feeling. Once in a while, look at yourself in the mirror and be like Captain Holt. Vindication. Feels good. Feels really good.
I'm a big anime fan. You know this if you know me. I love watching anime. And an anime that I've been recently watching is Hunter x Hunter. And in Hunter x Hunter, there's this thing called Nen. What Nen is it's basically the term for your aura and how you use that energy to do various things. And one of these things is fight. You can fight other people with your aura. And obviously different individuals have different amounts and powers and ways that they use their aura. So it kind of creates this power stratification, right? Okay, cool. So I hope that's clear. In one of the episodes, one of the characters, Killua, is lamenting on how he can't beat this bigger opponent called Knuckle, because Knuckle's a lot better at using Nen and using his powers than Killua is. But his mentor, Bisky, she tells him that it doesn't matter what your power level is. Really, your power level has a range. There's a range. So let me give some numbers so it's a bit more quantifiable. Knuckle, let's say, goes from either a 100 to an 80. Okay? And Killua maybe only goes from a 70 to a 90. So if they were both at their best forms, then yes, of course Knuckle would beat Killua. But who guarantees that they're always in their best forms, right? Essentially what Bisky was trying to tell Killua is that there is always a chance. Power does not exist in a vacuum. Even when you are mismatched, there is still a chance that you can win. Even if the best potential for both opponents are unequal. Because on someone's bad day could be on your good day. I mean, there's so many examples, especially in sports. Let's just take sports, right? Baseball, for example. Let's say you're an average baseball team, and you're playing one of the better baseball teams in the tournament. Are you guaranteed to lose? Well, the chances that you lose are probably more likely that you're going to lose, but there's no guarantee. there's always a chance. Luck is always a factor. The point is that it's not over till it's over, really. Mismatches, certain victories, anything really. If you're going to win, well, you're not going to win by your own merit alone. There's going to be, in baseball for example, there's going to be a dropped ball that the other team makes a mistake on. There's going to be some extra wind that gives your balls a little bit more lift when you're hitting them out. There's going to be that one dumb fan that creates a distraction in the stands and throws the pitcher off his game. You never know. And let's go back to Hunter x Hunter. Maybe the weather isn't good and the other person is more sensitive to the heat than you are, and they're feeling a bit down. Maybe their aura was spent the day before fighting some other opponent, so they can't use it on you. I mean, remember, like I said, power does not exist in a vacuum. And I get that some of the two examples I've provided so far have been a bit outlandish, maybe, if you don't play baseball or you don't watch anime or aura doesn't exist in the world. So here's something that I think all of you can find relatable. Tests. Let's say you're in a class and you have a consistent A+. Let's make that class AP Lang, right? Well, who's to say that you're going to get an A+ every time? What if the day before you could only get 6 hours of sleep instead of your usual 8? Well, of course, your mind will be processing as well. Or maybe you have to go to the bathroom the entire test, and obviously you can't leave, and it's just distracting you, right? So the point is, there is no certain victory and there's no certain loss. You may be mismatched, be either being on the upper hand or the lower hand. It doesn't really matter, but there is no guarantee. And really that's just more of you can expand that metaphor or that theme more into life. Nothing is guaranteed. There is always a way, there's always a chance for anything to really happen. So expect the unexpected, and honestly, just try your best. Like Bisky told Killua, who's to say you're going to lose? Who's to say you're going to lose?
A couple years ago, I read this really influential screenwriting book. It's called Story by Roger McKee. And one of the terms that McKee uses is spine. Basically, he's referring to the spine of a story. What is the plot line or thing structure that is keeping the entire story together? I'll give you a concrete example just so you can understand and contextualize this a bit better. For example, Lord of the Rings. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story, but if you're not, it's basically the story of how Frodo has this ring and he needs to throw it into a volcano. It's really that simple. But basically, there's a lot more that goes on in Lord of the Rings than just Frodo throwing a ring into a volcano. I think you know that, considering that the total runtime of all three movies is like 12 hours. There's a lot more than just throwing a ring in a volcano. But Lord of the Rings is always driven by that spine of Frodo getting to Mount Doom and throwing that ring into the volcano. That is the spine that keeps the entire story driving forward. And really, you can expand this whole spine metaphor of keeping, it's almost like a goal, right? You can expand this to your whole life. I mean, you've always heard of people who are driven by something. People are so driven. I mean, Hamilton, right? How are you running? Like you're running out of time. Like he's just such a driven person because he has one of the strongest spines that people have known of. He has this drive to reach this end goal of being influential and saving his country. That is his spine. So you start asking yourself, well, what is your spine? Besides, obviously, the vertebrae on your back. Well, of course, not everyone will know what their spine is, and maybe not everybody wants a spine, but if you do want a spine, how are you going about finding it? What is the spine in your life? And there are many ways people can find spines in their lives. Take basketball players, for example, in the NBA. The spines in their lives are working out really hard, playing games every day, scoring as much as they can, but ultimately the spine is getting to win an NBA championship. And really, I can say this about every sports team ever, right? I mean, the Spanish team during the World Cup, their goal is to win the World Cup. That is their spine. That's the story driving them forward. And that's why newspapers love sports, because you can have this whole Cinderella story, the underdogs, everyone grasping for the crown, because they all share the same spine. That's what makes it very competitive. And there are also spines in things like music, right? For example, one of my favorite songs, "Gravity" by John Mayer, it has this almost wandering spine where he's questioning how this metaphor of gravity is holding him down and how he can be free of that. And that's a very sharp contrast. And I think this is what a lot of people don't get right about jazz, is that, and sorry if that was a bit of a jump, but there are two ways people write music. And you'll find this very often in jazz. There's this wild improvisation that doesn't seem to go in a certain direction, and then there's the formulaic kind of pop rhythm that you'll see in most songs nowadays. And one of those two, the majority of the population are comfortable with, and of course I'm talking about pop, because it has a direction, people know where it's going to go, and it follows up on that promise of delivering that spine of where it's going to go in terms of music. Whereas jazz, people are discovering their spine as they play. And that's why a lot of people are like, I can't listen to jazz. It just gets me tired. So you see what I'm saying here, right? Essentially, the message I'm trying to say here is that you need to find your spine if you want one. And if you don't want a spine, I'm not telling you have to get one. But if you want a spine and you don't have one yet, finding one is what's going to make your life so much better, really. If you're like Hamilton, you're going to be accomplishing so much because of that inherent drive. If you're an NBA team, you're going to be working your ass off just to get to that championship. And if you're a song, which of course you're not, but if you're a song, you're going to have people knowing exactly what's coming and delivering that final precipice moment where everything just sounds right in the song. Find your spine. It'll help you in life. I recently saw this brilliant Penn and Teller magic trick. Basically what Penn did is he has this nail gun, right? Shoots a nail into a board of wood, a plank of wood. And he shows the audience he has this strip. It's basically a magazine. And there's a nail, there's a nail, there's a nail, there's a blank, there's a nail, blank, nail, blank. Basically, nail, nail, no nail because there's a blank, nail, no nail. There's a very set rhythm to it. I hope I've made that clear. And throughout the trick, he's saying this whole spiel about, magic is there's actually really no magic involved. It's a very precise art. It really just takes memorization. You just go, points it at his hand, no nail, of course. Of course, you have to remember where the nail is. Points it at his partner Teller, no nail, doesn't kill Teller. It's a very, very cool magic trick. And we as the audience, or at least me when I was watching it, I was in shock because I was surprised at how convincing the entire thing was. I think we all know when we see these kind of dangerous magic tricks that the performer usually isn't in that much danger. It's very well rehearsed, it's well prepared, there's safety measures, there's insurance, there's doctors on the side. We know that if the nail suddenly goes through Penn's hand, he's not going to be that hurt. But we're still like in shock. We're like, is he going to shoot a nail through his head? You see what I mean, right? It's a suspension of disbelief. And we can't really prove how the trick works. We don't really know. We can have theories. We can have theories as to how the trick works. Maybe the gun only activates when he points it down to the ground. Maybe there's a second button that he's using to actually shoot a nail. We don't know, and we can't prove it. But really, we can't prove it because we don't want to prove it. That's a very wide general statement, but think about it for a minute. Just think about it. You done thinking? Right. Would magic shows have any revenue? Any. If the performers knew how every trick, if the audience knew how every trick was done, I'm sure there would be some people who would take joy in debunking magic tricks, but most people just want to be amazed at this whole spectacle of finding out how surprised they are at how convincing real danger look, or how real fake danger looks. We can't prove it because we don't want to prove it. And this whole thing of suspension of disbelief extends to the whole movie scene. We know that there aren't such thing as Jedi, that the mafia doesn't really work like it does in The Godfather. We know these things. Yet, we're willing to spend, at least as a globe, we are willing to spend hundreds of millions to billions of dollars just watching these movies. Watching some purple guy snap his fingers. Like, we're willing to pay for that kind of stuff. Why? Because we just want to sit back, relax, and pretend for a moment that the world is that kind of magic. We can't prove it, that the world will ever be like that, nor do we want it to be proven. I don't want to wake up one day and find out that I don't have laser vision, that I don't have the detecting skills of a guy who dresses up like a bat. I don't want to wake up and find that out. But nor do I want to really convince myself of that fact. Just let a guy dream, right? Just let a guy dream. And there are very concrete examples of this in real life. I mean, just take the Loch Ness Monster, for example. Do you know how much tourism the Loch Ness Lake gets just because people still think the monster exists? I think by now people are still trying to prove it, but at what point do we stop trying to prove it and start trying to pretend like we're trying to prove it? It being the Loch Ness Monster's existence. Really, it's that tourism that kind of keeps that area alive. Basically, what I'm saying here is that we don't want to prove everything in the world. We can't prove it, nor do we want to. Because once magic is gone from the world, our sense of wonder will truly be gone. And our sense of wonder is what led us to discover new worlds and new horizons. But now we just have to look for those worlds and horizons elsewhere. Prove things to yourself, but realize that some things you just don't need to prove.